The combination of altitude and fresh, deep snow was too big an obstacle for Pablo and Allie. We're going to stay here for a couple of days to see how we feel, Pablo said. Wow, two more team members down. It was discouraging. Most expedition groups we had met had 8 to 10 members in them, but it seemed like Dad, Karen, and I were destined to remain a team of three. Nobody could keep our pace. It seemed that most climbers needed more time to acclimatize than we did. We stuffed everything into heavy packs and the three of us set out. Dad was in the lead. With each step, he sank almost to his knees in the snow. He did his best to drag his legs across the snow and plant them deep, creating a series of holes for Karen and me to maneuver in. His legs were so much longer than ours that we had to ask him to take smaller steps. It must have been exhausting for him, but he kept a steady rhythm, stopping only to check on me. Each time, he gave me one of those big smiles. I was beginning to realize that my dad's cheerful determination was rare in this world. Climbing was cold and hard. I paused for a short rest, leaning on my poles. Karen called to me, Jordan, what elevation? I checked my altimeter. We're at 18,500. Just think, Jordan, less than 1,000 feet and you'd be at top of Kilimanjaro. But this wasn't Kili, it was Aconcagua, almost 3,000 feet taller. The snow was deep, and the wind felt like it was about to send me bouncing down the mountain like that red tent. My pack was super heavy, and Karen and I had to work twice as hard as Dad to climb in and out of his steps. I dropped to my knees, totally spent. This was it. I couldn't go any further. Karen pushed through the snow to get me and took her mitts off to open a small pack of string cheese. Eat this and an energy bar. You have to eat. Now. You'll feel better. She was right. I needed fuel. I bit into the cheese and pretended I was home, eating a big hot pizza with gooey mozzarella. You can do it, Jordan, Karen urged. Don't give up. After a 10-minute rest and 2 imaginary pizzas, I got up and plodded on again. I kept telling myself that nothing was easy, just keep going. I climbed another half hour, putting one foot in front of the other. I was feeling lightheaded. What number would I give myself on the dizzy scale? Or for a headache? I was totally exhausted and having trouble moving. For the first time, my Everest steps were real. I planted my foot and stopped cold, not being able to lift it. Karen gave me some M&Ms that helped. It was so cold that they definitely melted in my mouth and not in my hands. Both hands were numb with cold. I continued up the long, steep switchbacks for another hour until the sugar rush ran out. My legs felt as mushy as that Russian spaghetti, and I staggered. Jordan, Karen yelled, are you okay? I looked back at her with icy tears streaming down my face. Dad stopped immediately and came back toward me while Karen pushed through the snow to reach my side. They made a huddle around me, and then Dad sat cross-legged in the snow and pulled me into his lap. What's wrong, little buddy? He asked. Why am I doing this? I cried. Dad held me tighter. You're following your dream. I could hardly push the words out. I can't do this anymore. I hurt all over and I'm so tired. Tears flowed down my face and froze on my cheeks. I'm scared and I miss my grandma and my mom. I want to go home. Dad whispered, It's all right, J-Man. Use the memory of your grandma to help you. She loved you so much. I inhaled a long, shaky breath. Dad had just called me J-Man instead of little J again, and that brought more tears to my eyes. Happy ones. His arms felt warm and safe. I knew my dad loved me and would never let anything hurt me. I removed a mitt and rubbed the back of my hand over my eyes, but the tears kept flowing. I couldn't stop them. It's okay to have doubts, Karen said quietly. We all do. There are times when I've stopped and asked myself, what in the world did I sign up for here? Why am I doing this race? I sniffed, trying to clear my throat, and looked at her. Honestly, so many times. The answer is always the same, she said. I sniffed even harder, trying to breathe. And that is that it feels good to keep going. The best part of the journey is when you overcome the pain and grow stronger. She brushed tears from my cheeks before they could freeze. You did that on your very first mountain, and I know you can do it here too. We'll help you. Then I imagined Samuel saying, It's okay to be afraid. That shows your great respect for the mountain. It wants you to climb it. Karen unzipped my jacket to get my water bottle. Drink some of this and have another energy bar. Dad was still holding me. It's your call. We can go up or down, but the quicker we move, the sooner we'll reach camp and get warm. I lifted my head and had to decide between climbing higher and giving up, between altitude and attitude. So I'd like you to pause and answer this question. If you were Jordan, do you think that you could keep going despite feeling so bad? Once you've answered the question, I will continue reading. I chose to push on. Aconcagua was a big summit, second only to Everest in elevation. It would help me get stronger for that climb. I tried to clear my nose and swallowed the last of my tears. Let's go. I'm ready, I said. We had just started back up when an Australian passed us coming down from Camp Berlin. Wind had destroyed his tent during the night and had flattened one that belonged to a Spanish team. They had been able to repair theirs, but his was gone. The image of that red tent bouncing on the mountain came back to me, but I blocked it out and kept going. I couldn't allow fear to get in my way. We leaned into the storm for another hour and a half and finally dragged ourselves exhausted into Camp Berlin, the last stop before the summit. I thought I was hallucinating due to the lack of oxygen when climbers from Polish, Italian, and Spanish teams clapped and cheered as we entered the camp. They showered me in with questions like how old was I, where was I from, and why did I want to climb Aconcagua. I didn't have much of a voice and let my dad answer. He had the widest grin I'd ever seen on his face. They must have heard about you being on the mountain, Jay, man, he said. Word spread about a young, strong boy following his dream. His words fed my spirit. Suddenly, I knew I could make it to the summit now. Can I take a picture with you? Asked a very thin Polish climber. At high altitude, you often don't feel like eating and find it hard to sleep. She and her team had been on the mountain for almost 3 weeks and were about to make their third attempt at the summit. That's what I call perseverance. I smiled to myself. I had it too. Even the ranger at Camp Berlin greeted me with a smile. I think rangers are pulling for you now, Karen whispered. After the welcoming committee returned to their tents, Dad and Karen tucked me into my sleeping bag. I was so dead tired that I didn't trust myself to be awake for the weather report. I set my alarm for 7 p.m., and when I woke up, we listened all together for the forecast. It wasn't good. The Park Service recommended that no one attempt to summit the next day. We were going to have deteriorating conditions for about 24 hours before the weather could improve midday on December 30th. Disappointed, Dad and Karen radioed John and Pablo that we wouldn't be summiting until then. And that's the end of chapter 14.